This story comes from a guy named Eli. He's a maritime electrician, i.e., met through a mutual friend at a wedding in 2023. Totally normal, dude, funny, easygoing. Nothing about him screams ghost story guy. But when the conversation turned to weird jobs and strange places, he got quiet for a second. Then he said, "I had a gig at Greywick Point once. Spent a week out there alone. Never again." I thought he was messing around, but he swore up and down it was true. He even showed me photos. He took nothing supernatural in them, just bleak fog, crumbling concrete, and rusted out stairs. He said he deleted the rest. Greywick Point is one of those lighthouses nobody hears about. It's decommissioned, way out on a crumbling peninsula in northern Michigan, just far enough into Lake Superior that the only way to reach it is by private charter or sometimes a helicopter when the weather's good. The lighthouse hasn't been active since the late 80s, but the Coast Guard still does structural checks every few years. The job that year, this was in 2019, was to assess the remaining wiring and evaluate if it was safe to gut the place for repurposing. Eli was subcontracted for a 5-day inspection. He was dropped off with supplies, tools, and a satellite phone. He told me the moment the boat pulled away, he regretted taking the job. He said Greywick didn't feel empty. It felt watched. The place was falling apart, rusted hinges, peeling paint, stairs that moaned under your feet. But what stuck with him wasn't the decay, it was the smell. Not mildew or rot, but something sharp and metallic, like old blood. The weird part, it would come and go. Some rooms reeked of it, others were clean. He checked for animals, even looked inside a decaying oil drum in the basement, but nothing explained it. The first night was uneventful, windy, cold. He said he stayed bundled up inside the old keepers quarters, read a paperback, and passed out by 10. The second night, things started to shift. Around 3 a.m., he woke up to the sound of footsteps above him. Slow, deliberate, like someone pacing on the observation deck. He sat up, heart hammering. There wasn't supposed to be anyone else on the point. He grabbed his flashlight, climbed the spiral staircase, and reached the beacon room. It was empty, no prints, no signs of disturbance. But when he opened the hatch that led to the outer catwalk, he found the gate unlatched. It had been closed when he got there. He was sure of it. He latched it himself the first day, had to wrestle it shut because of the wind. Now it was swinging gently in the breeze, creaking. He closed it again, locked it, went back downstairs. The next day, his tools were wet, not damp wet. He kept them stored in a sealed plastic box in the equipment room, and somehow every single item inside was slick with cold water. Not condensation, not a leak, just water, like someone had dunked them in a sink and set them back inside. He didn't have a real explanation for that, and he said he almost called for an early pickup right then. But he convinced himself it was a humidity issue, maybe something about the air. He wiped them off, got back to work. But the strangeness kept escalating. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the lake and fog started rolling in, he saw a light in the window of the detached fuel shed about 40 yards from the main structure. Just for a second, he swears it, flickered bright, like a lantern being lit, then disappeared. He thought maybe it was a reflection, or even the last bit of sunlight hitting glass. But when he went out to check, the fog swallowed everything. He could barely see 10 feet ahead. The shed was dark, locked, untouched. That night, he heard a knock at the lighthouse door. 3 knocks, paused, then 2 more. He froze in bed. flashlight in hand, staring at the entry. Then the handle turned, just a small creak enough to let him know it wasn't wind. Someone or something had tried the door. He didn't move. He stayed like that for an hour, barely breathing, waiting for more noise. But there was nothing, no more knocks. Footsteps, just silence. The next morning, he found something disturbing. On the landing halfway up the tower, someone had placed a single boot. Not one of his. It was old, waterlogged, crusted with lichen, and it was sitting upright, like it had been deliberately positioned in the center of the landing. He stood there, staring at it for a long time, took a photo, then threw it outside. That was the day he made the call. He told the dispatch team he needed extraction due to structural instability. Didn't want to sound like a lunatic. They told him the boat would arrive the following morning, weather permitting. That night was the worst. He woke up choking. He said it felt like he'd swallowed lake water in his sleep. He couldn't breathe, couldn't cough. He stumbled to the sink, hacking and gasping, and when he finally spit something out, it wasn't water. It was a tuft of wet black hair. He lost it, packed up his gear, turned every light in the tower on, and sat in the corner of the room with a crowbar across his lap. The lighthouse creaked and moaned like it was alive. Somewhere near dawn, the lights flickered and died completely. He sat in the dark for 3 more hours before the boat finally arrived. When they asked how the inspection went, he didn't answer. Just got on board and didn't look back. Later, when he went over the photos, he'd taken just structural reference shots. Walls, stairwells, wiring. He noticed something in 3 of them. A hand, faint, grey, pressed against the glass of the beacon room window. Each photo was taken on a different day, different time, same hand, same spot. He deleted them all. Said he couldn't stand to look at them. He told me that whatever out there on Greywick Point doesn't want to be seen, but sometimes it wants you to know it's watching. This happened in the fall of 2023, before everything in the world went sideways. I had just gotten out of a long relationship and was in that weird headspace where you're lonely but also kind of craving isolation. So I decided to do something completely different and booked a solo Airbnb trip up the coast of Maine for a long weekend. It was this tiny little cottage on a bluff in a town called Bowles Head. The property listing mentioned it was just a 10-minute walk to the lighthouse, and that sold me immediately. I'd always had a thing for lighthouses, something about them, being symbols of guidance in the middle of nowhere. I guess it felt poetic or whatever. The place was charming but really bare bones. No TV, no internet, spotty cell service. Just me, some books I brought, and the sound of the ocean. I liked it. First night was uneventful. I made some pasta, had a couple beers, and went to bed early. The second day, I decided to walk to the lighthouse just before sunset. It was off-season, so I figured it wouldn't be crowded. I was right. When I got there, the whole place was empty. The light itself was still on, rotating in slow, lazy sweeps, and the whole area felt ... still. Peaceful, but in that uncanny way. The sun was setting fast, and everything started to take on that deep orange hue. I took some photos, walked around, and then followed this short trail down to the beach. Now, this is where it gets weird. I was about to turn back when I noticed something sticking out of the rocks near the base of the bluff. At first, I thought it was just a piece of driftwood or maybe an old buoy, but as I got closer, I realized it was something like a door, like a hatch, almost. Rusted, bolted, built into the rock itself, right beneath the lighthouse. I stared at it for a while because it made no sense. There was no reason for a door to be there, especially one that looked that old. There were no signs, no warnings, nothing. I should have left it alone, but curiosity got the better of me, and I knelt down to look at it. That's when I noticed the bolts weren't actually locked in. They looked rusted shut, but when I pressed on one, it creaked open slightly, enough to make me feel sick to my stomach. Not because of the door itself, but because of the smell. It hit me instantly. Damp, rot, something animal. It was like the ocean, but wrong. The kind of smell that stays in your clothes. I backed away from it and decided to head back. The sun was almost gone by then, and the trail wasn't lit at all. I made it to the top of the bluff when I realized the lighthouse light had stopped rotating. I looked up at it completely still, not blinking, not moving. The beam was frozen in one direction. It made no sound at all. For some reason, that really unnerved me. I picked up my pace. I could see my cottage's little porch light faintly in the distance, and I started speed walking down the narrow trail back. That's when I heard the footsteps. Not mine, something heavier, slower, dragging. Behind me, I stopped to listen, thinking maybe it was an animal. But the moment I stopped, so did the sound. I turned around with my phone flashlight and scanned. The path, nothing. I told myself I was being paranoid. Kept walking. Heard it, again closer, like something stepping on wet leaves and gravel. I whipped around again and saw a movement, just a blur ducking behind a tree. I called out, "Hey." "Hello." Nothing. Just wind. That smell from before came back, but stronger, like it had followed me. I broke into a jog. The trail wasn't that long, but it felt like it went on forever. I could hear the footsteps behind me, again louder now. Closer. I didn't look back anymore. I just ran. When I got to the cottage, I slammed the door shut, locked it, and pulled the shades. My heart was racing. I turned off all the lights and stood in the dark, trying to listen. That's when I saw the porch light flicker. Just once, then again, then out. I was about to call someone, anyone, but I had no service. I tried refreshing it, walking around the cabin with my phone held up like an antenna. Nothing. Then I heard something brush against the front door, like a soft scrape. Something sharp, maybe. I didn't breathe. Then there was this sound, like a voice, but gurgled, wet, just one word, whispered, "Open." I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the corner of the living room with a fireplace poker in my hands, just staring at the door. I never saw anyone through the window, never heard footsteps leave, just silence stopped by morning. Everything looked normal. Again, the porch light was back on. The air didn't smell. The lighthouse was back to rotating. I left that same afternoon, cut the trip short. I didn't even tell the host why. I just drove until I had a signal and booked a motel 2 hours. Inland, later on, I did some Googling. Turns out that Lighthouse was supposedly built over the ruins of an old smuggler's hideout, back in the 1800s. Some say it doubled as a holding spot for people not goods before they were taken somewhere else. Nobody really talks about it locally. Don't know what that thing was, or what was behind that door in the rocks. But I do know this: I'm never going back near a lighthouse at night again, especially not alone. My name's Marcus, and what I'm about to share was taken directly from the personal journal of a man named Daniel Hurst. I found it while doing archival research for a documentary project on maritime disappearances along the Maine coast. The journal was mailed anonymously to the Maritime Museum where I was interning back in 2018. It came in an unmarked manila envelope with a single note that said, "He was never found." But this should explain why Daniel was what they used to call a soundkeeper, someone stationed at lighthouses to maintain the foghorn systems. He wasn't Coast Guard, more like an independent contractor working seasonal maintenance gigs. According to the entries, his last assignment was in the fall of 2009, on a remote island called Whistler's Crag, barely a speck off the coast, so isolated it wasn't even marked on most updated charts. The lighthouse there had been fully automated for decades, but the foghorn kept malfunctioning. The Coast Guard had logged over 19 false activations that month. Locals reported hearing the horn during clear skies. Daniel was sent to investigate, alone. The first few entries in the journal are pretty uneventful. He describes the island as bleak, just black rock, some dead grass, and the tower itself. No dock, no buildings, aside from a crumbling foghorn shack near the edge. He was dropped off by a supply boat and told they'd be back in 4 days. Just like Ian's case, he had food, gear, a cot, and a radio. The weirdness began on his second night. He wrote about waking up to the horn going off twice, but the fog was clear, stars were out. He manually deactivated the system and chalked it up to faulty sensors, but what stuck out was a line he wrote. "It's not just the horn I heard. I swear something else echoed after it. Something lower, like a reply." By day 3, things escalated. He noticed scratch marks on the inside of the horn shacked-in grooves, all clustered around the manual override switch. He thought maybe gulls had gotten in. Then came this part, 11:41 p.m. I heard the horn again, but the power was off. Generator still cold. I was holding the main battery fuse in my hand. He stayed inside the lighthouse that night, locked everything. The next entry was short, just one line. "There's someone else on the island." No elaboration, nothing. But the handwriting was different, shaky, uneven, like he wrote it in a hurry. Entry after that is a full page, written in the morning. He describes hearing knocking on the lighthouse door at 3 a.m, not pounding, not scratching, just 3 slow knocks, like the person outside was being polite. He didn't open the door, but when he went outside at dawn, he found something placed. On the step, a shell. A perfectly clean conch shell filled with seawater. And inside, he said, was a tooth. He said he tossed the shell off the cliff and tried the radio, but got only static. He thought about lighting a distress flare but decided to wait until morning. The final entry in the journal was the most disturbing. He writes, "I heard the horn again. This time I let it finish. It sounded longer, fuller, like it wasn't mechanical anymore. It ended with a breath, a wet, gurgling breath. I ran to the shack. No one there, but the floor. The floor was wet, and there were bare footprints. Not muddy, not dirty, wet, like someone had just come out of the ocean. They led into the tower, and I followed them like an idiot." Then it just stops, mid-sentence. No signature, no last date. What's even stranger is that the Coast Guard logs show Daniel Hurst did sign out for that assignment, but the return pickup reported the island empty. They assumed he'd fallen off the cliff or got swept away, but there was no sign of distress, no damage, no missing gear, and no body. The envelope that contained his journal had no return address, nothing to trace it. I handed it to the museum curator, and he took it straight to storage. But I made a photocopy. Still, have it. The part that gets me most, though, isn't the shell or the footprints. It's the last unfinished sentence. I think it lives in the fog. I think it waits until that's it. I've checked. There's no official record of Whistler's Crag in the NOAA Lighthouse Index, but locals near Bar Harbor say there's a place out there, black rocks that sing during storms. They won't sail near it. Never have. Some say the horn still goes off in clear skies. Others say the sound you hear isn't a horn at all,